Thank you, Dennis. So, Sherlock Holmes and Mr. Watson decide to go camping. And they have dinner and a little wine, and then they decide to go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, Holmes wakes up, and he nudges his friend and says, "Watson, Watson, get up." Watson says, "What's it? What is it?" Sherlock Holmes says, "Look up. What do you see?" Watson says, "Lots of stars." Sherlock Holmes says, "And what does that tell you?" And Watson says, "Well, astronomically, it tells me there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions and billions of stars out there. Astrologically, it tells me that Saturn is in Leo. Theologically, it tells me that God is expansive and much bigger than any of us can ever imagine. It makes me feel humbled and small. And I'm going to say that word again. Meteorologically, I suspect that we're going to have a beautiful day tomorrow. Finally, orologically, I think it's about 3:15. And Watson says to Holmes, "What do you think all that means, Holmes?" And Holmes says, "Watson, someone has stolen our tent." So my talk today is We Are Star Stuff. I love it. I just love that idea that we come from that material that is out there in the universe, that we come from the universe itself. And we often call God the universe, don't we? I know that when I go out into the desert, go out away from the lights of the city and look up, I just feel awestruck, don't you? Just amazed at the beautiful sky, the beautiful night sky, and how much is out there. Imagine my glee when I saw those photographs from the James Webb Telescope. It absolutely rocked my world. I don't know if it affected you that way, but it certainly affected me that way. And I have some pictures here we're going to show you. This first picture is a patch of sky that's about the size of a grain of rice if you were to hold it at arm's length. It's a tiny, tiny sliver of the universe, and it holds thousands of galaxies in it. The Webb telescope was launched about 6 months ago, and it's only been transmitting photographs now for a couple of weeks. It was a joint venture between NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and the European Space Agency. I love it how the world has come together around this with no politics, right? It took 20 years to build this, and it cost $10 billion. It's 930,000 miles away. Imagine that, almost 1 million miles away from where we stand. We were able to successfully launch a telescope that gives us pictures like this of the universe that we've never seen before. It's 6 times more powerful than the Hubble telescope, which was launched in 1990. This telescope and these images tell us that there are over 200 billion galaxies out there. So how about the next picture, John? This picture is of the Karina Nebula. It's 7,500 light years away. It looks like a landmass, doesn't it? But you know, it's dust and it's gas. And if you look really closely, you can see stars on the other side of it. You can see right through it. We've never been able to do that before. And then the third picture is of the oldest galaxy that we've ever seen. This is being called the Phantom Galaxy. And it's being called that because there seems to be a spinning hole in the middle. Now, scientists are enthralled with this because they're trying to figure out, is it a wormhole, something with openings at both ends, or is it a black hole, something with a single dense point at the end with no escape? Imagine what we're going to find out about the universe, about ourselves, about life, and about God when scientists discover and continue to explore this. One of the things I really love about this is that this speaks to scientists, it speaks to artsy people, it speaks to spiritual people, religious folks. If you think about it, the scientists with their geeky brains who figured all this stuff out are just eating it up. They're exploring it, and they've got all kinds of things they can do, discovery and learn about, and all kinds of experiments. So they're going to love exploring this more and come up with more scientific discoveries. Artsy people are going to be touched and inspired by the beauty of these photographs. And then spiritual folks are going to be in awe of that divine intelligence that created this. Doesn't it really touch you and make you feel that connection to spirit? The American astrophysicist Carl Sagan said, "The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, and the carbon in our apple pie was all made from the interior of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff." And Neil deGrasse Tyson, another American astrophysicist, says, "We are literally made of stuff created by the stars that burned out billions of years ago. Without the death of stars, we wouldn't have life." We're part of the universe. We are in it, and it is in us. That's right, you are. So Joni Mitchell. Everybody love Joni Mitchell? Did you see that amazing video that went viral this week? I just have to honor her for that courage to be as vulnerable as she was. And you know, that's another talk. But I want to mention her because she wrote a song in 1970 called Woodstock. And the chorus of that song says, "We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." So how do we get back to the garden? And where is the garden? I propose that that garden is right where every one of us is right now. And that light from those stars, that light is right where every one of us is now. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles tells us that we never left the garden, that we only closed our eyes and fell asleep. What if we were to wake up? What if we were to remember who we are and what we are, and that we are that same stuff that those stars are made of, that same stuff that everything is made of. It's really time for us to stop having this limited perception of who we are and what we are here to do in this universe. A man got on a train and realized that he sat down right next to Pablo Picasso. He thought, "Oh my gosh, it's the master himself. I love him. I'm so honored to be here next to him." So he turned to Picasso and he said, "Mr. Picasso, I am so honored to meet you. I love your work, but I have a question for you. Why is it that you don't really paint reality? Why is it that you don't paint the world the way it is?" And Picasso looked at him and said, "Well, may I ask you what reality looks like?" And so the man reached in his pocket, pulled out his wallet. Out of his wallet, he took out a picture of his wife. And he said, "Like this. This is my wife." And Picasso thought for a moment and said, well, she's very small and very flat." We have too many limited beliefs. So it's time that we let go of some of those limited ideas about life and about who we are. Because if we can do that, we can grow spiritually. And we all want that, right? We all want to grow and have a deeper relationship with the One. And that can happen anytime, any place, anywhere with anyone. But what I know is it happens for most of us more often in nature. Don't you have that deep experience, those deep experiences of oneness when you're out in nature? And that makes sense because for as long as man has walked this earth, the presence of something more has always been felt in nature. Being out in nature helps us feel expanded and connected. Ernest Holmes says, "The manifest universe is the body of God. It's the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God." So when we can see this kind of magnificence and feel part of it, we are all having an experience of God. And in the Bible, you know that in the Old Testament alone, there are over 2,000 references where God speaks to man through nature. And many of those passages, God actually speaks with a voice. Like in Genesis, when he talks to Adam and Eve. When he talks to Noah and tells him to build an ark. When he talks to Moses through the burning bush. There are also some in the New Testament. The one that came to mind for me was in Luke, when Jesus is being baptized. and a voice comes from the heavens and says, "Thou art my beloved Son. In thee am I well pleased." And there are lots more. But what I know is that God doesn't necessarily talk to me in a voice. And I'll bet God doesn't talk to you in a voice either. God talks to me in a spirit, in my heart, in a feeling, in a deep knowing that opens my heart. It's usually a gentle knowingness, but it feels right. And you know, when I feel that, I know that I know. There's no question. And I know that you feel that as well. Sometimes it comes from seeing a ladybug or a beautiful flower or the love of a child or the love of a partner or a piece of music. God wired us to communicate non-verbally as well as verbally. And I believe that those non-verbal communications, those tools that we have within us, allow us to have that deeper relationship with Spirit. I think that all of us here have had those moments, right? Those moments where you feel truly connected, where time disappears, where space disappears, and it's just you and God, and everything is God. There's this concept called numinosity, and it comes from the Latin word numen. It means arousing spiritual emotion. It can also mean religious emotion. Think about the evangelicals and talking in tongues. Right? So I think every religion, every spiritual tradition has their own idea of what numinosity means. And I think you probably have your own idea as well. You've had your own experiences of that feeling of oneness. That idea has been around for ages, but it became more of a modern concept by Rudolf Otto in his book, The Idea of the Holy. And I want to tell you how he described it. He says, "It's a feeling that may come sweeping like a gentle tide, pervading the mind with a tranquil mood of deep worship. It may pass over to a more set and lasting attitude of the soul, continuing, as it were, thrilling, vibrant, and resonant. It may burst in sudden eruption up from the depths of the soul with spasms and convulsions and lead to the strangest excitements, to intoxicated frenzy and speechless humility that comes in the presence of that which is a mystery that is inexplainable, inexpressible, and all-powerful." That's having an experience of God. And for me, when I looked at those photographs, I had an experience of God. It does usually happen out in nature, but it requires that you be totally present in the moment and willing and open. It requires that you feel and can feel one with everything that there is. Whether you call it numinous or not doesn't matter. What matters is you have that experience of oneness. And one of the most important elements of that is it always leaves you wanting more. So I want to tell you a story. I'm a scuba diver, and it was 1996, and it was my 12th dive. Does anybody here scuba dive? A few people. So you know what I'm talking about. Those first few dives, you're all about the doing. You're all about the air, the gear, your regulator, your weights, all the stuff that you have to do. And you can't really totally enjoy the experience of diving. And this was my 12th dive, and I was about ready for that. I was kind of tired of all the doing. And I was a little nervous and a little anxious, and I was even feeling claustrophobic. Imagine that, claustrophobic in the great big ocean. But I was feeling claustrophobic. And it was the 12th dive. I was kind of beating myself up. By now, I should really start enjoying this, I thought to myself. And I got down to the bottom, and I looked up, and suddenly, everything changed. There was a pillar of light that was coming through the water. And through that pillar of light, a spotted eagle ray was floating, almost flying. And it stopped, and then it went around me and played in my bubbles. And that just gave me giggles inside. It gave me so much joy to feel that connection with that spotted eagle ray that was enjoying my bubbles. I drifted up a little bit into that pillar of light, and the eagle ray drifted down a little bit, and it was right in front of me. And it looked at me almost as if to say, "I see you." And in that moment, everything seemed to disappear. I wasn't in the water anymore. I was the water. I heard something, And at first it seemed like it was out there, and then it seemed like it was in here. And I looked around, and there was a parrotfish chomping on the reef. And I was feeling every one of those bites. I wasn't watching the parrotfish, I was the parrotfish. I wasn't looking at the beautiful colors in the coral, I was the coral. Time seemed to stand still. This was a numinous experience. I learned that this was the beginning of a love affair with the divine in a new way for me to see God and experience and feel God. And in that moment, I realized that all the study that I had done, that was all in my heart, had just sunk into it was all in my head, it had all sunk into my heart. And my heart opened, and I was changed that day. Now, I still dive. I have 250 dives under my belt now, but you know, I've never had one that was just like that. Although I use that moment as a touchstone. The moment I take that giant stride and get into the water, the moment I'm completely submersed, I remember that feeling of unity. I remember that feeling of oneness, and I feel that expansive nature of God. I'm all about being, and no longer am I worried about doing. And I think that's what a numinous experience does for all of us. It brings us to this place where we're about being the presence of God. In Walden, or Life in the Woods, Henry David Thoreau says, "We need the tonic of wilderness." I love that, don't you? The tonic of wilderness. At the same time that we're earnest to explore and learn things, we require that all things be mysterious and unexplainable, that land and sea be infinitely wild, unsurveyed and unfathomed, because they are unfathomable. We can never have enough nature. I think that the draw of something beyond our understanding is part of what makes nature so majestic. It's what brings us to that place of being able to see and feel and know God when we're out in the world. Think about the giant redwoods, or the Grand Canyon, or Machu Picchu. Think about the Cliffs of Moher, or a rainbow. I could go on, but there are places for all of us that words can't describe. And this is a numinous experience when it's beyond the possibility of explaining it with words. It's just a feeling and a knowing and a connection. Nature has so much to teach us. You know, there's a practice in Japan called Shinrin-yoku, and it's about forest bathing. People get together and they walk in the forest, and they don't talk, they don't think, they just walk, just present in the forest. And the truth is, you don't have to go to the forest to do that. You can do that anywhere out in nature. There's a man who's a woodcutter, and he decided to take his son into the forest and teach him about woodcutting. And so as they walked through the forest, the man said to his son, "You know, you can tell the purpose of a tree by how it looks, by its natural shape. Today, we're in the forest, we're going to be cutting wood for boat builders. Take a look at this tree over here. It's got a long, straight trunk. It's perfect for planks. Take a look at this tree over here. It's got curved arms, and those curves are perfect for the ribs of a boat. And that one over there, see how tall it is? It's ideal for a mast." And the son was listening, and he thought, wow, this is amazing. And the father said, "You know, anything in nature will tell you what its purpose is if you just get quiet, look at it, and listen." And so the boy was walking along, and they were picking out the trees they were going to cut, and they came across an old, gnarly oak tree. And the boy said, "Papa," wanting to make sure his dad knew that he had listened, "see this tree over here? It's really big, and it's really old, but it's not good for boat building. It doesn't have a strong, straight trunk. The arms are all curvy and curly in lots of different directions, and it's not very tall, so it can't produce a good mast. What if we cut it down for firewood? Maybe it's for firewood." And the dad said, "Well, that's possible, but today we're here to look for wood that's for boat building. So let's think about that a little bit later. In the meantime, let's keep cutting these trees down that we've marked." So they cut down those trees, and after a while, the boy said, "Dad, I'm getting tired." The father said, well, let's go sit under this tree, have some shade and something to drink. Well, lo and behold, they leaned up against that old, ragged, gnarly oak tree that the boy wanted to cut down for firewood. And the father said, you know, every tree has a purpose. Everything that God has made has a purpose. And if we listen and we get quiet, we will learn what that purpose is. Like this oak, he said, you were eager to cut it down for firewood, but look how it's serving us. It's provided us with cool shade. I wonder how many other people this tree has provided shade for. He said, God has made everything out of itself, and that means it's in everything. God made everything out of itself, and that means it's in everything that it has made. Think about that. Then he told his son, recognize and see that everything is connected. Be patient, pay attention, listen, recognize, and discover your purpose by being quiet and listening. He said, then you'll know your place in the universe. In Richer Living, Ernest Holmes said, I believe it was Plato who said that God is love, truth, and beauty. It's always seemed wonderful to me that one of the world's greatest thinkers should have included beauty as a necessary part of the divine. How evident this beauty is everywhere we look. How wonderful is the landscape, the sunset, the color of the desert at dawn. How beautiful the daffodil in its sweet simplicity. And what majestic beauty and strength there is in the mountain and in the wave. Everything is rooted in beauty. Its symmetry and charm and grace and loveliness, all beauty. Surely we should identify ourselves with this terrific beauty that pours its warmth and color over everything and seems to be the very root of our being. You know, human beings have always been drawn to beauty and majesty, and they've always found it out in nature. Maybe because nature invites us to look deeper. So as Ernest Holmes says, we can look within and find it. In the diary of Anne Frank, she writes, the best remedy for those who are afraid, lonely, and unhappy is to go outside, somewhere where they can be alone with the heavens, with nature, and with God, because only then does one feel that all is as it should be, and that God wishes to see people happy amidst the simple beauty of nature. As long as this exists, and it most certainly always will, I know that then there will always be comfort for every sorrow, whatever the circumstances are, and I firmly believe that nature brings solace to all in their time of trouble. When we get caught up in the stuff of life, it's like God is playing hide and seek with us, isn't it? God might be behind that door or at the other side of this difficult conversation, or tomorrow. Might be on the other side of a meadow. Sometimes it's hard for us to find. The truth is, God is always there in the beauty. We've just closed our eyes, as it says in the Course in Miracles, and fallen asleep. May all of us practice this so that we can stop playing hide and seek and only find. So the invitation to you this week is to get out there in nature and let nature take you deeper than it's ever taken you before. Look at it with fresh new eyes. Look for the beauty and the majesty. Feel one with it. Look up at the night stars. Realize that what's in those stars is in each of us. Soak in the beauty of God's creation. Practice the present so that it becomes something you can do when you feel like God is hiding from you. Make it that touchstone, just like I have that touchstone of the feeling of unity when I was in the water. Make it be something that you can lean into anytime you forget, so that you can remember to remember. And I have one last story for you. Avalar was walking home, and the night was starting to fall, and she knew that she wasn't going to make it. So she decided that she was going to find a place to stop and rest. And she found a temple with a beautiful grove of trees and some statues of the gods. And she sat down with her back against a tree, and by her passed cows with bells hanging from their horns. They were making their way home as well. She leaned back against the tree, and out of the temple ran a young man. "Old woman, what are you doing?" She said, "Excuse me, what are you doing? You're pointing your feet towards the gods." And she said, "The statues?" And he said, "Yes, you're dishonoring them by pointing your feet towards the gods." And she said, "Well, young man, I would be happy to move my feet. Please kindly tell me which direction I might not find God." So let's pray. I bring my consciousness deep within to that place that is so vast and expansive, like that universe out there, full of infinite possibility and potential, recognizing that God is that good that I feel and know and see as I look through the eyes of love and see that love looking back at me. I recognize that infinite power and presence of love everywhere, in everything, in everyone, knowing that everything is for me, that infinite power lives and loves through me and as me, and that every experience I have is a connection. It's an opportunity to be and feel and know that I am one with the one, that every person I encounter is like a sunbeam to the sun, each of us always connected at source. How grateful I am for the ability to walk outside and see God in a butterfly or a flower or a rainbow, and to remember the truth of who I am, the truth of this life, that it is vast, limitless, expansive, all good, and all-knowing. How great it is to be able to lean into that and know that all things always come together for good. How great it is to be able to celebrate seeing God everywhere I look and feeling that light that not only lives out there in the heavens in the night sky, but right where I am, right where each person here is. So with a grateful heart, I release my word, calling it good, because I know that it is, and so it is.